Ladies and gentlemen, 1010 Money Talk Radio presents
Here Comes More.
Mason Dixon Wide Open with the Sarge.
My goodness, that was fun.
Pat, you're like a one-man band in there.
What on earth, Pat?
Now, you know what happens is it's so sensitive, I accidentally touched that mouse and that happened.
What's the lesson? The lesson is...
Don't touch anything?
Don't touch anything.
Don't touch anything. Things were better in the old days, right? When you had things that you at least knew how to manipulate properly.
Yeah, it was right there. You see, my elbow.
You can't help it.
It was just a lot easier when you had to queue up records, you know?
That's right. That's what I'm saying.
Well, it's Mason Dixon Wide Open with the Sarge without Mason Dixon today because...
Hey, that's what I'm saying. We need to get another intro for this program.
Yeah.
No Mason?
Let's hope he's not listening.
Let's hope.
No, I'm hoping he is.
Well, you know what? He's cheering, too, because he's enjoying, although he may be on his way back at this point,
now,
but he has been enjoying some much-deserved time off.
Yeah, been having a good time. I had a great time yesterday. I went and talked to a group of adult education people. It's in a thing called OLLI, which is a series of classes that are presented through USF, I guess. Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine, George Hyde, is teaching a class this semester on fake news. And so...
Big topic of the hour.
Yeah. And so he said, you've been associated with some fake news in your day. Oh, baby. Oh, yeah. I mean, from the time I was really young, I had one in Vietnam that I gave them as an example of a correspondent who just totally falsified a story for the reason of getting it on the evening news.
Huh.
Yeah. He made it look like our troops had shelled a orphanage.
Oh.
And it wasn't. It was the VC. And I proved it to him. I took him out. My job was to take these correspondents out. Mm-hmm. I took him out. I showed him the orphanage. I showed him the shell casing or the shrapnel that was left afterward that had Chinese and Russian on it. Mm-hmm. And I said, see, it wasn't us. And he stood up and he said that it was friendly fire.
Wow.
But he said the reason was I'm going to get on the evening news if I say that. If it's just the VC, if nothing else is going on, I'll get on. But boy, with it being friendly fire.
It wasn't even a political agenda then. It was a personal agenda.
Personal agenda.
Wow.
Yeah. But it was really funny. I thought I would go through the fact that fake news has been going on for a long time. So who do you think? This is a presidential candidate talking about another presidential candidate. A hideous hermaphroditical character which has neither the force and firmness of a man nor the gentleness and sensibility of a woman.
I don't even want to wager a guess at that one.
Well, the other guy said that the other guy was a mean-spirited, low-lived fellow, the son of a half-breed Indian squaw, sired by a Virginia mulatto father.
Wow.
Then the other was labeled a fool, a hypocrite, a criminal, a tyrant, while the other one was branded a weakling, an atheist, a libertine, and a coward.
Makes Donald Trump seem like a saint all of a sudden.
You know who those were? John Adams and Jefferson.
Yeah, okay.
John Adams had been Jefferson's vice president, but
Sure.
they pulled apart on political things.
Right.
And they started slinging mud. Back then, you didn't have the internet and all of this stuff that we have now and Twitter. And they typically didn't go out on their own and do these kinds of things.
At least not under their own name.
Not under their own name. Jefferson hired a hatchet man named James Callender to do his smearing for him. And he actually convinced a lot of Americans that Adams desperately wanted to attack France. So Callender, this hatchet man, served jail time for the slander that he wrote about Adams. He got out of he was just in for a year, and he got out in 1801, and he thought that Jefferson should be paying him some money for the good job he did. But Jefferson thought, screw you.
You're a convicted felon, buddy.
I'm not going to pay you. So Callender broke a story in 1802 that had only been a rumor until then, and that was
Sally
Hemings having an affair with one of his slaves, Sally Hemings. He had a series of articles about it, and Callender claimed that Jefferson had lived with Hemings in France, which she was in France with him, indeed, and that she had given birth to 5, count them, 5 of his children. So you fast forward to, that was in the early 1800s. In 1828, it was Andrew Jackson and John Quincy Adams. And Jacksonians said Adams was an elitist aristocrat, broke the Sabbath, gambled with a billiard table he bought for the White House, and provided a young virgin for the Tsar of Russia during his tenure as a diplomat there.
Gracious.
They attacked their wives. Adams' camp discovered Jackson had courted his wife Rachel before her divorce in a previous marriage was finalized. Such an act usually constituted sin in the morals of the day. So there was one guy shortly after that, a historian who was writing about it, and he said, the election of 1828 boiled down to, do you want to vote for someone whose wife is a prostitute, or do you want for someone who has pimped for the Tsar of Russia?
Wow.
Oh, just great stuff. And I brought it forward to...
There's a lot of plausible deniability there.
Yeah.
Because it's not on the internet, right? So you could feasibly say, I've never seen that before. I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
What was the guy's name? Whatever his name was, out there printing, he had nothing to do with me. That's for sure.
Nothing to do with me. So I brought it forward to current. And remember the time just recently where there was stuff all over the internet that Adam Schiff's sister was married to George Soros' son. You remember hearing that?
Vaguely.
Yeah, it was very short-lived. But and the reason that it seemed plausible is because Adam Schiff has received a lot of campaign donations from organizations attached to Soros.
Well, and he does always kind of look like he just got like $1 billion check from George Soros. He's like, whoa.
Yeah. So that lasted for about a day until people figured out that it wasn't right. Well, that day, though, I saw that and I thought, oh, that's a great subject for today. So went down to Mason and we talked about it. So I did a little more study, and I did this fact check. I thought, well, wait a second. If his sister married George Soros's son, that would have been. It was in New York, and that would have been a huge story. So I just went online, and I found the New York Times article about the wedding. Melissa Robin Schiff, the daughter of Marlene S. Schiff of New York, and the late Dr. Haskell Schiff, married on May 5th, yada, yada, yada. So, okay, that's the parents of Melissa Schiff.
Okay.
How do I find the parents of Adam Schiff? Well, that's pretty easy because he's a big politician and all kinds of stuff written about him. So the first thing I found, 10 things you didn't know about Adam Schiff. Number 1, Adam Bennett Schiff was born June 26, 1960 to Edward and Cheryl Schiff in Framingham, Massachusetts. Oops, different parents. Marlene Schiff and the late Dr. Haskell Schiff were her parents, and Edward and Cheryl Schiff in Framingham, Massachusetts were the parents of Adam Schiff.
So you had to get your shift straight.
And to get your shift straight. That's exactly right. So anyway, it was a lot of fun. We had some lively conversation for about an hour. I talked about my feelings for Walter Cronkite.
Oh, yeah? And what are those?
Well, my feelings on Walter Cronkite are this. He was a great anchor, did a great job, was very convincing. People loved him. Mm-hmm. He was the authority of the day. But when I was in Vietnam in 1968, we had the Tet Offensive, and then we had the May Offensive. And in the Tet Offensive, I mean, it was tough. And but in the end, we beat the daylights out of the North Vietnamese and the VC. Right. In the Delta, we did a real job on them fairly quickly, actually, by comparison to the North. In the North, in Hue and in areas like that, it was a tough deal. Mm-hmm. So Cronkite goes over there, and he says, he does a stand-up, and I remember watching it on TV when I was in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And we all went, what are you talking about, dude? Because he said that it's just a stalemate. No, it's not a stalemate. We beat the crap out of him. Mm-hmm. And then he said, let me see. It is increasingly clear to this reporter that the only rational way out then will be to negotiate, not as victors, but as honorable people who lived up to their pledge to defend democracy and did the best they could. Well, I said that he said that it was an unwinnable war.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a stalemate and the only thing we can do is negotiate, doesn't that mean it's an unwinnable war? Wouldn't you think?
It's so hard to define what winning in war actually means, I think, is half the problem, isn't it? Because, you can have military victories on the battlefield, and you could do far better on the battlefield, as we did than the North Vietnamese.
Yeah.
But and we
It
killed.
was a political loss.
I mean, it was 10-1 or better.
Oh, we beat the daylights out of them.
So,
I mean, it was no contest. We beat the daylights out of them, and they were on their heels. It wouldn't have taken much to push it all the way and then really get something done.
Yeah.
But because of what Walter Cronkite did in the wake of the Tet Offensive, we were done.
It was the toughest fighting of the war thus far at the Tet Offensive?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And then he came out and basically said, we need to basically get out of this. We need to negotiate our way out of this.
Yeah.
Not as victors.
Because he said it was a stalemate. A stalemate is when both sides are button heads,
right.
Like in World War I, before the United States came in, that was a stalemate between the Germans and the French and English.
Right.
That was a stalemate.
Right.
This wasn't a stalemate at that point. That was their big try to get it over and didn't get it done.
Mm-hmm. Another stalemate's kind of almost Korea. It's not the same as World War I, which was really, really a bad stalemate. But, I mean, Korea basically bogged down at that point. Yeah, I mean, it's in an armistice position. But
yeah, it's an armistice.
But we basically held on to what we could at that point, I think.
Yeah, it's just an armistice of a continuing war. Mm-hmm. So it's still going on. So
well, now, what were some of the comments from the crowd?
Well,
how do they think about fake news?
They think it's horrible. But
do they have an idea of where it's coming from? And
see, that's what I was talking about. How do you determine if it's fake? And it's not easy. What it boils down to is you have to do the best research you can.
Yeah.
You need to watch all sources. You don't watch just Fox. You don't watch just MSNBC or CNN or CBS or whatever. You kind of have to get several sources and kind of filter it through your own filter, and then do some research online. And most people don't have time to do that.
Right.
We do it because we do these shows and we try to filter out everything, and sometimes we don't get it right.
Well, and it probably requires you as an individual to go out and take some initiative to go look for the stuff.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Because if you just wait for what's delivered to you on your Facebook feed or something, then you're going to get only a certain kind of story that Facebook wants you to have.
Right. I mean, I think they were very happy to hear from someone who has been on the front line, so to speak, with news, and especially that story from Vietnam. That was 1968. That was a long time ago when that correspondent absolutely lied so that he could get on the evening news. Lied.
One of the things I'd love to talk some more, and maybe after the break, when we come back, I mean, what is the future of journalism? Because you're somebody who has studied it and has done it for years and years and years, and I think the future is going to be very different from what it was 100 years ago.
One word. Alas.
Rosebud, right?
Yeah. We have a bunch of stuff. I didn't mean to go that long on that particular subject, but it was a lot of fun yesterday.
Yeah,
talking to them and showing them that this is nothing new.
Right.
It's so much more prevalent now because of everything that we have, the Twitters and the Facebooks and the internet and all of these different. Anybody can just go online and pretend that he's an expert.
Right.
And
everybody's got a printing press.
Throw facts out there.
Yeah. And they're in their basement now, instead of a printing press, everybody's got a computer and can publish to the whole world.
Yeah. We got around. Do you want to continue a little bit with this?
Sure, yeah. I think it's a fascinating
fake
discussion.
News after we come back?
Yeah.
On Money Talk 1010, 103.1 and 92.1 FM.
Rev it up, Tampa Bay. Here comes more Mason, wide open at full throttle with the Sarge on 1010 Money Talk Radio.
Okay, so Mason Dixon is out today, and Morgan Streetman is here with the Sarge.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Sarge.
And we got all involved in talking about fake news on the other side of the break. And Morgan, you have this thing that you told me about something that could be real or could be not real. What is that?
part of the interesting, as we were talking about, what is the future of journalism? And it seems to me that journalism is to a degree changing sort of fundamentally in that it's becoming more of a distributed cause. And we don't have the Walter Cronkites as our sole source of information.
Yeah, that's one of the things we covered at the show. Is there anybody out there who has picked up that mantle of Walter Cronkite, Huntley Brinkley, Edward R. Murrow? There is no one like that out now.
Well, no one person, but that responsibility has been distributed to a bunch of people across a wide swath of people now, which is the citizen journalist, which is the new trend that we're seeing with Twitter and Facebook and the other media sources that folks can get access to very easily and essentially broadcast to the entire world with nothing more than a smartphone. That's a big change.
Big change.
Never has existed. I mean, Charlie, you know as well as I do the amount of work that goes into trying to put together a radio station studio and everything else. Mm-hmm. And, these folks can basically, with their iPhones, do almost exactly the same thing.
The 400-pound guy in the basement of his parents.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, not all these are. Some of them are really pretty slick and getting slicker. And one guy who's done really well, and we were talking some about this guy in particular, but he's kind of one of the faces of this new media, is a guy named Mike Cernovich, and he's a Twitter guy primarily. It seems like that's where he got his biggest following. He also does Periscope live videos, but very low production value. So in other words, I remember one of the very first videos of his that I'd ever watched was actually him from bed in the morning when he woke up.
Oh, geez.
So I mean, you talk about low production value. You don't get a lot lower than that. He had a cowlick. So, but anyway, Cernovich has broken a couple of stories. Now, nothing like Drudge Report with the Monica Lewinsky super bombshell, but he's coming out now and he claims, and the way that he's doing it, I'm thinking he must think that the rug is not going to get pulled out from under him, because he's making a big deal about it, that he's got this kind of exclusive breaking bombshell that one of his sources inside the FBI, and again, he does have a track record of proving that he does have some government sources and have some inside information. One of his sources inside the FBI says that what's actually been determined now is that okay, let me just tell folks about this. You know the word 302? We keep hearing 302s. That's the FBI interview form.
Right.
It's like Form 302. So instead of calling it an interview form, they call them 302s. So that is what they do. Usually after the interview, they sit down and write a summary of what the interviewee said. And that's all kept online. It's kept electronically. And so in any event, what he has said is the story is that Andy McCabe, you remember Andy? Yep. Andy's office where the insurance policy was discussed. Mm-hmm. Andy with the $120,000 Porsche that he bought right after he got promoted.
Yep.
That Andy, okay? Andrew McCabe apparently, according to Mike Cernovich's source, went in and changed the 302s from the General Flynn interview. Okay, so he changed the interview forms that had the notes about what General Flynn allegedly said. And then to put a little icing on that cake, he deleted the revisions. Now, the way this works is inside the system, it tracks each revision, creates a new document so that you could, in theory, go back to the original, see what was originally written, and then see every change as it was made along the way. And that makes a lot of sense why you would want to have that as a lawyer.
Sure.
That's the kind of thing that, I salivate over. I'm like, oh, that's a great system. I love that. Okay, so of course the FBI would want that. So who in their right mind would ever delete those revisions? Because there wouldn't be anything to hide. I mean, a bunch of Boy Scouts like the FBI, they don't have anything to hide. Well, unless Andrew McCabe changed the final version to say something that General Flynn hadn't said, and he wanted to get rid of the evidence of what General Flynn had actually said, he would delete the revisions, leaving only the one copy.
Well, I'll tell you something. Doing deletions is very dangerous because nothing is ever really deleted unless you use something extremely sophisticated.
Right, unless you wipe it with a cloth, right?
With a cloth, yeah.
With that bleach bit cloth or something like that. Yep. I mean, just ask Hillary Clinton. You're right, doing deletions is dangerous, but isn't it odd how many times they tell us that documents have been deleted or lost? I mean, considering the fact that we know the NSA probably really does have all of the emails and stuff somewhere, in some facility. I'm not saying they're easily accessible, but I mean, give me a break. But they don't ever lose anything, but yet we constantly hear in the news that these records have been lost or deleted. I'm sorry, we don't have them.
Right.
That to me is highly suspicious, of course.
And usually when they're deleted, when you say, well, they've been deleted, then that kind of ends the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But recently, it hasn't been ending the conversation because people know that delete doesn't necessarily mean get rid of.
Well, kind of like we were talking about yesterday with Chris Gobbets. I mean, he was telling us about how CARE wanted to get rid of a bunch of documents and basically tasked him with going and trying to shred them. I don't know if you got a chance to hear that, Sarge.
I heard the show. Why don't we talk about that?
I mean, because that guy was fascinating.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, well, Chris Gobbets is a guy who, as a young man, let me just set the stage a little bit. His dad was a longtime Air Force OSI officer. Now, OSI's Office of Special Investigations, they do things like counterterrorism, special projects that are kind of not off the books, but not in the traditional Air Force chain of command. Specialists. So, and as he described it, basically anti-spy work was what his dad did. So people probably trying to get in and steal information from the Air Force about its various systems. So his dad had that background. And then after 9/11, actually went with the State Department and became an Arab linguist and was, I guess, conducting intelligence operations at some level for the U.S. government. Now, he didn't specify exactly what level that was at, but it does seem that was basically what was going on.
This is the elder Gobbets.
This is the elder Gobbets, exactly. And the younger, basically the elder said, hey, I need somebody I can trust. And you know as well as I do in these intelligence operations, trust is everything. And who could he trust more than his son, who he really trusted? So he talked to his son, and his son was willing to do it. So his son grew a long beard and basically started attending a mosque. And he started attending, the mosque. It was the mosque where, if you remember that guy, Anwar al-Awlaki, who was the first American killed by drone strike in Yemen. Well, before he was an imam in Yemen, affiliated with Al-Qaeda, he was operating out of Falls Church, Virginia, as Gobbets would have said, a suit-wearing jihadi, which is kind of what they all are. So he was operating out of there at that mosque as the imam, where Chris Gobbets went and actually had his conversion. So he was right in the heart of the beast, so to speak.
So he told you exactly why he did that whole thing, right?
Yes.
He just needed someone he could trust on this project he was working on to show what the Muslim Brotherhood is like behind closed doors. And so he asked me, and the rest is history, as they say. I ended up going into those mosques and ended up working with CARE, which is Hamas here in the United States. And the book Muslim Mafia came out in 2009 detailing that experience.
Wow.
And that book, by the way, is fascinating. Pat George has got a copy of that. Pat, how much of that have you got through so far?
I'm on chapter 3.
Awesome. That's good for Pat, let me tell you. Normally,
that's great for me, seeing that the last 2 books I read were the life of Jimmy Buffett.
Pat told me you went to get a cup of coffee, right? And you sat out in your truck and
I did. It was captivating. It was so interesting. It was so exciting. And it was just I couldn't put it down, and I did. I sat in the vehicle. I was going to just read the preface and drive away.
It's a great book.
Hour and 10 minutes later, we're still there.
What's the name of the book?
It's called Muslim Mafia.
Okay. Highly recommended.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's got a bunch of documents at the end of it. And of course, Chris has got this website with this group that he's the vice president of now called Understanding the Threat. And so their website is understandingthethreat.com. And all of the documents that are important you need to know about if you want to dive into this issue and look at the real evidence. In other words, if you'd like to look at some facts and not just what somebody tells you is the truth. Because we challenge, as Chris does, we challenge folks, go out there to the source documents.
Right.
These documents are filed in federal court by the U.S. government. They are not fake. They are the Muslim Brotherhood's actual archive documents, some of which were captured in a raid on a house in Annandale, Virginia in 2004, which we've talked about before several times on my show, and lay out the plan for the Muslim Brotherhood to essentially take over the United States through what they call civilization jihad. Civilization jihad, which is different than open warfare jihad. And open warfare jihad we're familiar with. That's the terrorist attacks. That's war. Civilization jihad is where they infiltrate our country, become established, put tentacles out into politics, the media, business, and all areas like they have done since their very first Muslim association, which was the Muslim Students Association in 1963. And now there are thousands of groups, all spawned by the Muslim Brotherhood. They're all coming from the same source.
Which was terrifying. You think it's just the bombing, but it's not. So much more is going on. 90% we don't even see.
Right. And some of what he talked to us about was, some of this infiltration strategy.
This is a war of narratives. One narrative says that these problems that we're facing with terrorism and cultural jihad, that has nothing to do with Islam. And then the other narrative is reality.
Right.
And what we're trying to do with understanding the threat is push the truth and the reality narrative out there, which is why groups like CARE want to shut us down everywhere we speak and everywhere we do training.
And he's exactly right. And in fact, here they are. CARE right now is trying to shut this group down. Now, these guys are good guys. And again, I encourage you don't take my word for it. Please don't take my word for it. Go out to understandingthethreat.com. Look at the resources and source documents. Look at what they're doing. If you really are interested in this subject, I'd highly recommend you get their Volume 1 of their DVD, because Volume 1 is kind of the general overview of the whole story, start to finish. It's extensive. It's a great DVD, very well done, high production value, and it will explain everything that you need to know to you in an hour and 45 minutes. Now, obviously, there's more research that you can do as you get interested in this. You can find more and more and more, but this video is what we would call a primer.
Right.
It'll get you ready. It'll help you to understand it, and you'll see the source documents on the screen. You'll have them explained to you in detail. So I would highly recommend that folks go out there and do that. But the guy that actually founded Understanding the Threat, John Guandolo, he is a former U.S. Marine, graduate of the United States Naval Academy, as well as a former FBI agent. He's actually supposed to be speaking to the United States Naval Academy tomorrow at lunch about this exact issue. And guess what's going on?
Oh, boy, I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, some rootin' tootin' fake news reporter out of Baltimore, out of the Baltimore Sun, named Jonathan Pitts. Well, he apparently has been told by CARE, who, by the way, is an unindicted co-conspirator with Hamas.
Yep.
Okay, now there's just no question Hamas is a terrorist. I mean, could we agree on that? Can we agree that Hamas is a terrorist organization?
I'm sure there are people who would disagree with that, but I will agree with you on that.
And those same people who would disagree with me on that should never be listened to for anything ever, because they have no credibility, because there's no argument but that Hamas is a terrorist organization. Well, the U.S. government has said that CARE is essentially the same as Hamas. They're an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation, which was the largest terrorist financing funding case in U.S. history that occurred after 9/11.
But they're very slick.
They're super slick.
And appear on news media in the United States saying how they're not this horrible thing that everybody thinks they are.
Right. And meanwhile, they scrub their English language websites to get the evidence off of it, so you just can't figure it out. And then they say, you know what the problem is? You just don't understand Arabic, or you're Islamophobic. And that's something that Chris Kabatz has heard a lot.
As serious as this topic is, I just have to laugh sometimes, because we're called Islamophobes and haters and bigots, and yet I'm using materials that are in mosques all over the United States to train from. So I think that they're calling the wrong people Islamophobic. They should be calling the imams Islamophobic, because they're the ones that have recommended the material that I train out of.
And he's exactly right. You can get this stuff. I've got some of it. There are dozens of books you can buy that are distributed at mosques, some that are even distributed in our own schools here in America.
Yeah. We're going to go to break here real quick. We've got a little bit more on this to get to you, but just so you know, Morgan Streetman is an attorney here in town, and he attacks things with the mind of an attorney. And I have never seen anyone as thorough as Morgan is when he attacks an issue.
Oh, thank you, Sarge.
And Morgan does a show on Money Talk every Monday at noon that's repeated at 5 o'clock in the evening. And if you haven't heard that, you need to listen to it noon on Monday and 5 o'clock on Monday. And we're going to do a little bit more on this when we come back on Money Talk 1010, 103.1 and 92.1 FM.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are running wide open with Mason Dixon and the Sarge on Money Talk 1010.
Okay, here we are back. Mason is going to be back tomorrow, but Morgan Streetman is with us today.
Sarge, I'm so glad you called me in.
Oh, me too. It's always an interesting show when you're here. And this story about the guy who embedded himself in care is really interesting.
It was absolutely fascinating. His name was Chris Gobbets, and we had him all hour yesterday for the show. And boy, it was one of those shows that I think we're going to wind up running that one multiple times, kind of like we did with the George Soros show.
Yeah, and that was one of those shows that you went, oh, the hour's up already. There's so much more.
And even he said that at the end. He said, "Boy, this has just flown by." And
Yeah.
and by the way, I'm in the works to organize another hour with him real soon.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, he's got so much interesting stuff to share. And folks, we want you to help. We want to help you understand some of this stuff. And one of the things that we recognize is that we all suffer from information overload when we try to look into this. You know, there's a lot of different organizations,
Yeah.
a lot of different names, a lot of different individuals' names. And many of these individuals have, pet names or aliases that they use. And so we're looking through these documents, and it can be, it's a lot to look at, and it's kind of a lot to assimilate. So we try to kind of boil it down for you, but we encourage you to go back to these source documents, particularly using a site like understandingthethreat.com to go there where it will go ahead and orient you to the 10 or 12 key documents that they say, we think these are the most important source documents for you to look at. And then you can pull them out yourself. And some of the stuff that you'll find in there is it's almost unbelievable what they're saying. And there was one quote in particular that really was offensive, and talks about essentially that the process of settlement, and we talked about this yesterday. Settlement is not settlement like we might think of the term.
Right.
It is a process of jihad. It's a process of we're settling there for now, but we're only settling there because we're doing it for the purpose of taking over one day and changing that place.
Right.
It's not we want to go there and conform and be a part of America forever. It's we're going to go there until we have enough people there to make America part of the Islamic State.
Yeah, it's not a mindset that we understand because when our families immigrated to America, they came here to be Americans, and that's not the plan here for these jihadi Muslims.
Right. Yeah. Those people thought, "Wow, America's a shining city on the hill. We want to go there and become like that."
Right.
These people think America is the great Satan, or just Satan is just enemy. Okay, the great adversary, and we want to go there and undermine it for the cause of worldwide Islam.
Yeah, it's a Moorish attack.
Yeah. Great reference. Yeah. And so here it is right out of their source document from 1991. It says the process of settlement is a civilization jihadist process with all that word means. The Muslim Brotherhood must understand that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their own hands. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
That's what they want to do. And so these are the same smiling people. This is care.
Right.
These are the and let me put quotes around this for those who can't see it at home. The Muslim civil rights activists CARE, which is really a terrorist organization. It is it's the public relations arm of a terrorist organization.
So the argument that we see all the time is that this is a very small group of jihadists within the larger Muslim community, and the larger Muslim community doesn't necessarily feel this way. And I'm hoping that's true. Is it?
Well, I have long hoped that's true as well, Charlie, and that's kind of how I've always tried to think about it myself. But
How else can we in Western society think about it?
Well,
that's who we are.
We have to think about it as, I think our commitment number one needs to be to truth and reality. Mm-hmm. So wherever the truth takes us, whatever the reality is, that's what we need to understand about it, whatever that is. And unfortunately, I'm afraid to tell you that according to Gabbets and his group, and I think there's a lot of reason to believe what they're saying, and I'll tell you some of what those are. But according to them, no, it's not the jihadis are the outliers. They're not the ones who are the weirdos on the edge or on the fringes. They are actually the core. And when you go back and you look at the source documents, you look at the religious source documents that including the Quran and other things, and more particularly some of the other things which get into a lot of detail, you see that is accurate, that the jihadis who are violent jihadis are the ones who are correctly applying what the documents say for the religion. Now, we could argue about whether they're getting it correct or not, but if you just looked at the documents, kind of like those people who are fundamentalists who believe that, the Bible's literal word of God and that kind of thing, if you just looked at the documents, they're actually getting Islam right. And so, and Chris Gabatz makes an interesting point, which is that, all of these jihadis who all get their version of Islam wrong. They're all these normal, everybody's a moderate wearing a suit until they wake up one day and they're a radical. And the interesting thing is they all become radicalized in the exact same wrong mindset. In other words, they all get their version of Islam wrong in the same way. And that, I think, is indicative of the fact that they're not getting it wrong. They're all getting it right. That's what the documents say. That is what it is. And I think we need to just confront that, and we need to understand that because we're stuck here in a war of narratives.
The Muslim Brotherhood has so infiltrated our government that they fully understand that, with very few exceptions, federal agents are not sending people into mosques undercover. Mm-hmm. Right? They are so terrified of the implications of that because of their Islamic advisors have told them that it would be offensive to Muslims.
Right.
It would be offensive to jihadis, which is exactly why we should be doing it. But so they're not expecting this, is what I'm saying. And so from that perspective, having my father, who had worked not only counterintelligence operations, but also just basic narcotics operations undercover at the Air Force, we knew fully well how to do this legally and how to go in there. But that is one of their Achilles heels, is they're not expecting it because, with very few exceptions, it's just not happening at the federal level, and I would even argue at the state or local level. And so, played right into their playbook. They want to get American converts to then work apologetics for them on television and with national and local media. That's part of what they call, when you are reading the document from the explanatory memorandum, civilization jihad by our hands. That's part of the strategy.
Okay.
Well, so to speak to your point, Sarge, so if we are convincing ourselves that the radicals do not represent the truth about Islam, then we're actually kind of playing into the Muslim Brotherhood's hands, because that's exactly what they want us all to think, and that's the narrative that they're pushing. Just like when John Guandolo is going to speak to the U.S. Naval Academy, all of a sudden, and you're just going to tell the truth, just going to share facts. All of a sudden, CARE is firing up some Baltimore-based reporter to say, oh, this guy's an Islamophobe, this is racist or anti-Muslim or something like that. I mean, isn't that kind of the implication? And you, U.S. Naval Academy, you should be better than this. You should recognize that Islam is noble and that those people who are committing terrorist acts, well, they don't represent Islam. Wait, trust me, you go watch these videos, you go watch some of these rallies. You go watch these rallies where they say, who here supports Hamas? Who here supports Hezbollah? And you tell me how many hands don't go up, because every hand in the crowd goes up. You go watch some of these when they don't know it's going to be rebroadcast to a non-Muslim audience. Watch some of these conferences when they ask questions. How many of you favor stoning for adultery? Every hand will go up in the room. How many of you favor, basically, you name any of the corporal punishments listed in the Sharia law, and every hand will go up. You know why? Because in order to be a Sunnah observant Muslim, in order to observe the right way of living as demonstrated by Muhammad, you must accept Sharia as the highest form of law, because Sharia comes from Allah. So Sharia is the absolute pinnacle of any legal system that could ever exist on the planet, and they believe that one day they'd like to replace our Constitution and our set of laws with Sharia. The problem is, folks, that means real bad stuff for us, and frankly, for the Muslims themselves. I mean, it's stuck in this terrible situation. A lot of the people, because it is a submission-based religion, people are part of it because they don't want to die many times. And it's easier just to give in, convert, than to be killed. And we've seen that time and time again throughout the Middle East.
You know, it reminds me of the Inquisition in Spain. Mm-hmm. Same thing. If you were Jewish, let's say, if you were Jewish, the inquisitors didn't want to have you around. Mm-hmm. So you had a couple of choices. You could die, mm-hmm. or if you wanted to live, you could convert to Catholicism. Mm-hmm. And then you could be a low-rung Catholic mm-hmm. and survive in Spain. Or a lot of Jewish people were sent to the New World to settle the New World because they needed people to settle the New World. Mm-hmm. And these were some people they wanted out of Spain, and they took them and they put them in with in the missions mm-hmm. and mm-hmm. converted them to Catholicism mm-hmm. and then populated the New World. And the same kind of thing, you know, just moving Catholicism into the New World, which they moved the Catholicism not so much into the United States, into North America, but into Mexico and South America, which was all Spain, mm-hmm. totally Catholic.
Right. Well, you've got stories going back to the Bible, and you got Rome, where if you didn't bow down to Caesar, they would put you to death. I mean, this idea of forced religious conversion's gone way back in human history.
And let's be honest, Christian missionaries did the same thing. Christian missionaries, some, did the same thing when they went out and they were not really answering to anyone. Some of them were pretty violent in converting the native population to Christianity.
Well, I don't know. I didn't see that movie, The Mission, but what I will say for sure is that we know what's going on right here today with us.
Yeah, I mean,
and
I just brought that up.
No,
that people sometimes can be nasty people.
Absolutely.
But that wasn't this huge movement of doing it that way. This is a huge movement. Now, neither one of us want to be called Islamophobic, because, I don't believe that I'm Islamophobic. I know Muslims that are friends, and we get along fine. I don't want to be looking behind me all the time thinking, oh, my God, every Muslim wants Sharia law implanted. But, what is the truth? And getting at the truth, once again, this goes back to the whole fake news thing. Mm-hmm. What is the truth? Where lies the truth? And we'll keep trying to find it. As we continue on Money Talk 1010, 92.1 and 103.1 FM.
And now, Mason Dixon will tell you about the cars he has owned. Not really, but something like that. Hey, Sarge, can you wake me up after it's over? Car Bull is on 1010 Money Talk.
Well, Mason will be back tomorrow, and today it's the Sarge and Morgan Streetman. This whole Takata airbag thing, there's about 37 million vehicles are under recall for about 50 million defective Takata airbags. And that's just epidemic. Mm-hmm. They can explode when the bag deploys, and shrapnel comes out and can actually kill people and definitely injure them badly. Additional airbags are scheduled to be called by December of 2019, which means they're sitting in cars now defective, right? Oh, no.
A little bomb in the steering wheel.
So how do you find out? How do you find out if you have a defective airbag? Real easy. Go to NHTSA.gov, NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Association, NHTSA, NHTSA.gov, and just click in airbags, and they'll take you to places that say Honda, Acura, Mazda, Ford vehicles with Takata airbags. And there is a place where you can put the VIN number of your car in.
Oh, that's great.
And you can actually see if your car is one that is under a recall. Mm-hmm. And some of these recalls are really tough. Some of them are, don't drive the vehicle, just drive it to the dealer. Well, that's really difficult to do.
You think they'd send you a letter?
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Great to be here.
I appreciate you coming in. Yeah. A lot of great information today. And tomorrow, Mason will be back, and he his wild and crazy self, I'm sure, all prepared from being gone. Please be at ease.